Good evening. This is the third of uh, Beyond the Basics, diving deep into generative AI for math and science. I'm glad that you all came on a Thursday evening to join us talking about math and science and generative AI. This is the third in a three-part series. I don't recognize any of your names, so welcome. Thanks for joining for this one. Hopefully you've been able to participate in some of the other OECM sessions brought to you by OECM, Dell, and Advanced Learning Partnerships. I would like to take a moment for our land acknowledgement. I know that we're all joining from different places and this is a virtual session. Please go ahead and add your location where you're joining from in the chat if you'd like. I'm joining from Chicago, Illinois. Thanks, Maureen. And then as you're doing that, sharing where you're from, Kingston, great. I would also like to point out a little disclaimer that we have. I'm going to share about some AI tools, and we should just be mindful that the tools that you promote and use within your school board should be board approved, and make sure that you're using tools that are approved by your board. Thank you. By way of introduction, I am Rachel Fruin. I'm the Director of Professional Learning at Advanced Learning Partnerships. Whenever I talk about AI, I've started to really think about what are my human skills that I'm bringing. If AI is this powerful tool that can solve problems, it can analyze data sets, it can create lesson plans for teachers and do all these amazing things, what am I bringing as a human? When I took the StrengthsFinder test, one of my top strengths is futuristic, which goes hand in hand as to why I've been so interested in AI from the beginning and why I've been studying it and getting to the point where I'm facilitating these virtual sessions. So I always say that because I know that there are a lot of opinions and feelings about AI. More so, I feel like the emotional piece of AI has been brought into education more so than with other tech tools in the past. So I'm just mindful that there may be people in the room or people that you serve within your school districts that are hesitant or resistant to AI, and I welcome those opinions. And I think we need all the voices in the room. So I bring futuristic, connectedness, ideation, positivity, strategy, and I know you all bring your own strengths as well. So I want to amplify our own strengths in a world with generative AI. So for tonight's session, our outcomes are to explore ways that students can use Gen AI in math and science and understand how to create the conditions for critical thinking with generative AI in learning. So I would love to know in the chat, how have you been using generative AI? If you're coming from a math or science background, I'd be interested in those specific examples or elsewhere. Like I said, this is the third in a three-part series, and so far I haven't had any math or science educators in these sessions. Folks have just been coming to learn, which is awesome. I'm really glad everybody's taking advantage of these opportunities. So if you want to share what your role is and what subject matter expert you are, that'd be great. But I'm also curious how you're using generative AI. You're welcome to unmute yourself too. We got a small room.
Yeah, I haven't used AI in math and science, but I use AI to help me analyze some academic article. Yeah, because some article may be more than 36 pages. So sometimes I can ask them to help me analyze. So it saves me some time and I know what the article talk about, discuss what information I can just take it from there. So it save me a lot of time.
Yeah, I love that application. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else? All right, well, we'll get into some math and science specific examples. I found this framework for AI literacy from some professors at Barnard College, and I really like the idea of thinking about, as educators, how are we growing in AI literacy? So the foundation of the pyramid is understanding AI, and then we move up with use and application, and then we get to analyze and evaluate, and then we get to do things like creating with AI, making things possible that haven't ever been possible before. So the previous couple of sessions, I've been kind of climbing this ladder. We spent a lot of time in the first session talking about what is AI, how does it work, what is generative AI. We did some practice prompting last week, or I guess it was 2 weeks ago. And this time I want to go even deeper into that and try to figure out how we can analyze and evaluate even more. And I see your responses in the chat, so thank you. That's helpful to understand the context of how you're joining. Because this is such a small group, please feel free to interrupt me, tell me what you need, questions that you have. Because it looks like we've got district leaders and school leaders in the room. You might have a different perspective for the teachers that you serve, and I'm happy to kind of focus on any of those needs as you have those questions. So just to make sure that we're all on the same page, kind of about those basics, what is generative AI? Generative AI algorithms can be used to create anything new, whether it's audio, video, code, images, text, simulations, data sets, anything that we want to generate, these tools can do for us. And then the second part of kind of this quick foundations, I always like to emphasize that using generative AI comes with risks, and seeing what roles you serve in, I can definitely tell how you probably already know what some of those risks are and are mindful of them, and probably bringing a cautious approach through the education lens when we're talking about applying generative AI. Some of the ones like Monopoly, I'm very interested in like where the money is going in generative AI. I think it does apply in education when we think about some of the ed tech tools or some of the generative AI tools are just wrappers around OpenAI software. So OpenAI is getting a lot of access to our students in our schools and things like that. Yeah, this graphic is, I put the link in here by John Ippolito, and I found it on this group. I'm typing it in the chat. There, I think if you can Google AI X education, it was a group of college students and actually high school students who started in the summer of 2023 creating this group for educators. And John has posted and shared materials through this group. They have a newsletter that comes out every other week that I find to be really good. They have student voice in their newsletter. They have graphics like these. They've got example lesson plans. It kind of covers K-12 and higher ed, but definitely recommend researching John a little bit, and then that AI by education. I don't know how they pronunciate the X, if it's by or whatever, but that's a great resource. And then, of course, we've got the impacts on like plagiarism, cheating, academic integrity have been big conversations. it's interesting from the math and science perspective because there have been tools, solvers, problem solvers, Wolfram Alpha that can solve any problem any student puts in it. So from a math and science perspective, we've already had software that we've had to address when we think about like students taking pictures of problems with their phones and getting the answer given to them, things like that. So plagiarism and academic integrity has been a little bit different since math and science have already had experience with some of those tools. And then things like hallucination, bias, things like that are also important to be mindful of around this conversation. In terms of math and science, it's interesting to think about where the world is going with AI and thinking about what kind of world we're preparing our students for. So I've been sharing some real world examples of generative AI using math and science, and there are a couple that I want to emphasize tonight. This asteroid identification, anytime in science where you have a data set of billions of whatever the thing is that you're measuring or trying to identify, generative AI has been really strong in helping synthesize that material, where it's taken scientists a lot of time to go through very vast amounts of data. Generative AI can do it quickly. And so this asteroid identification has been really interesting, where they can identify 27,000 new asteroid candidates, including ones that could be coming close to Earth. It sounds very much like a sci-fi movie, but it is actually reality. And then this other article is really interesting. Developers at the University of Austin, Texas in Austin, won a bid for this project, for the grant to work on this project. And they used AI to correctly predict 70% of earthquakes a week before they happen during a 7th-month trial in China, which is wild to me. And I know there was an earthquake on the West Coast tonight. So just knowing that is really powerful. The same thing is true. It's become really good at predicting massive weather events like hurricanes and storms. When we think of weather, there's all sorts of like really good forecasting models, but generative AI does something in addition to using the forecasting models. They use the history of weather to analyze and combine the forecasting models with the actual events that have happened in the past to really accurately predict the events that are going to happen in the near future. So shifting now, thinking about like where students are going with math and science and how AI is applicable in these settings. In an ideal classroom setting, and particularly I'm thinking about secondary because the age limit for students to use AI is 13 and over for most tools. Districts might have even higher age requirements or rules, but if we dream of a world where students would be using generative AI for learning, how would you know when you walked into the classroom if it was good? Like, what are the things you would be seeing, hearing, observing? I would love to kind of paint this like ideal picture and see throughout this session if we can use AI to help us kind of get close to that dream. You can unmute yourselves or share in the chat. As you're typing and thinking, I'll share that I do a lot of work with teachers in classrooms, and this has been a big question that we've been asking on a practical level. we have this new tool and we're going to try this exciting lesson, whatever it may be. But we don't really know how we're going to know whether the lesson is effective. We've had different measures or look-fors in the past, maybe based on some like 21st century skills like collaboration, communication, critical thinking. We also have, in terms of technology, the SAMR model is the technology of substitution, augmentation, modification, or redefinition. So those are other words that we can use to define kind of what we would be observing. But I think it's important to not just expect teachers and students to be using AI and like magic to happen. Like we kind of have to define what the end goal should look and sound and feel like. Any thoughts? Either what you've observed or what you hope for within your schools? I agree, Brent. I appreciate how you emphasize like the learning goals first. The AI can be there as a tool that we use to meet those learning goals, but it's not the purpose. Agreed. Any other thoughts? All right, well, feel free to continue sharing some answers in the chat. I would love to know then, we know Brent just shared with us that we want to have clear learning goals that go into a lesson plan. What are other key ingredients that go into a really good lesson plan? What things would teachers be considering as they're designing a lesson for a day? Yes, assessment plan, I agree. Yeah. How are we going to capture student voice? Well, hopefully this question is jogging some ideas, and if people are watching the video recording later, they're also thinking, yeah, determining next steps, progress monitoring, kind of readiness. I appreciate they use the word framework because that was the first on my list. There are a ton of different frameworks, right? It could be I'm trying to remember what they're called in Ontario. I was looking it up. There's like math uh math progress. I'm forgetting the name of it, but like your scientific process and your math pedagogy, math action plan, strands. Yes. Thank you. What is being evaluated, triangulation of data. Thank you guys for adding these. So any sort of framework you want to include, the standards, the purpose of the lesson, sometimes your lesson, and these are things that teachers are doing intuitively, but I'm asking the question to get us to be able to get to a good prompt. And so starting from the basics is sometimes helpful for that. Like, is this lesson an introduction to new content? Is it a review? Do we want them to use technology or not? What are the expectations for students? Any of those other learner profile skills or 21st century skills that we want to add in addition to the curriculum standards, performance standards, achievement chart. I love this. success criteria, co-created success criteria, absolutely. Yeah, we want to consider, as we're asking an LLM, if you could be using ChatGPT or Gemini, Claude, Perplexity, any of these things. We want to be able to give the LLM as much information as possible to get the best result. So I'm going to show an example that I did just so you can see the idea of asking for a lesson plan in a content specific area. It could be math or science. It really could be anything. Is about asking the right questions and being patient to get the answers that you want. So just as a little bit of my background, I taught high school math for 15 years. So math is my personal love, but anybody can apply these things, whether it's ELA or social studies or science or anything like that. But the STEM areas are kind of my expertise. So in all honesty on this prompt, I did link it here in case you want to go back and read it, but I accidentally hit enter too quickly. So you'll see that I didn't get exactly what I wanted from the beginning, but I started with, you're a curriculum designer in Ontario, Canada, that specializes in secondary math. Create a math lesson that utilizes all mathematical processes. This is the word I was trying to remember. So problem solving, reasoning, reflecting, connecting, communicating, representing, selecting. So that was one of the focuses that I wanted to attend to. So it created a lesson, but I had to come back and say, like, okay, the other thing I want is to align it to a framework. I'm really fond of Building Thinking Classrooms by Peter Liljedahl. If you're familiar with the BTC framework, it's really great for getting students engaged and discussing mathematics and problem solving together. So I asked it to incorporate Building Thinking Classrooms and generative AI. So I wanted to create a lesson where students were going to use generative AI and asked it to explain when, why, and how students will use it. So I won't have you read the whole thing, but it incorporated Building Thinking Classrooms. These are specific chapters within the Building Thinking Classrooms book. So that was great to see. And then explains how generative AI is enhancing thinking. It's suggesting brainstorming, offering multiple representations, encouraging critical evaluation. So it gives me a problem. It poses a scenario of a cell phone company offering two plans, describes plan A and plan B, and then it directs students to use generative AI to explain how to compare two linear cost models and how can we represent the cost. As a teacher, I was like, kids are just going to put this problem into generative AI and get the answer. They're not going to go through and do the rest of this lesson plan because they had the tool that solved the answer to their question. And you can see I'm still scrolling through this lesson plan and students already had the answer at the beginning. So this was my discussion with ChatGPT. I said, how do we get students not to just plug the problem into step one and get the answer right away? So I said the problem students are solving needs to be unsolvable by AI. I haven't had like so much success with this, but I keep trying and like rewording it so I can get something closer to unsolvable, and I'll show you the result in a minute. Or use of the AI has to happen at a different time. You can't let students have the AI at step one. They need to do some thinking first. Another helpful piece to prompt is like the do you understand? It's kind of like activates the AI to think differently. Not that it's thinking, it's just coming up with the best answers, but the most reasonable answer. That seems to be something that helps it. Okay, so it comes back And it tells me it's the same problem with additional layers of complexity that make it unsolvable. So it gives me this problem. Again, if you want to read it later, you can. I will tell you that I plugged this question into Claude and got the answer right away without doing any math or critical thinking. So this is where, after all this iteration, I finally got, as the user, got to the point where like, oh, I think I really know what I'm trying to ask here. Think creatively and come up with a lesson plan that uses the mathematical processes, building thinking classrooms framework, and includes some use of AI without having AI solve the problem. This type of lesson has never been created before, so you have to use your imagination to design something effective and beneficial for students. Include details like when a student can or can't use AI, when the class should explore with AI together, with the teacher, or when students are engaged in deeper thinking and learning. So what happens when teachers are using generative AI for lesson planning? Sometimes they're not impressed because they ask for a lesson plan and what they come up with isn't going to be helpful. Like teachers are kind of wasting their time using the AI because they could come up with something better than the AI. And this is where kind of like this continual discussion and dialogue in the chat can lead to better processes. So I'm scrolling down. This is the problem that the AI came up with. Your marketing team designing two competing phone plans for a cell phone company. Your goal is to create a plan that appeals to a specific customer. Compare your plan with your competitors and justify why it's better than your targets. This students could copy and paste into AI, but they're going to have to think critically about like what the components of a cell phone plan are, and we're not giving them the problem that they can just plug and chug from scratch. So on the slide deck, I've created this prompt, and I would love for you to try it with your own, whatever subject matter you prefer. But the piece of this that is really, I think, helpful is this type of lesson has never been created before. We are telling the LLM, like, you have to give me something different that doesn't exist. And you can put in any of the frameworks that you want, like science, any of the vocabulary, science. You don't have to use the building thinking classrooms framework. I did do BTC and another chat prompt, and it gave me some BTC meant something totally different than building thinking classrooms. And you can add like whatever standards you want and whatever topic you want. So why don't you take, let's do 4 minutes for you to copy and paste this prompt into any LLM of your choice, ChatGPT, Claude, Copilot, Gemini, school-based one. And then let's have a discussion about like what you experience with that. Hopefully you had a little bit of time to play. I would love to hear what you got out of that experience. Is there anything from this prompt that you find useful or not useful? Or would this type of prompt or this prompt exactly solve an instructional challenge that you might be facing or the teachers that you work with might be facing? Well, hopefully, something within that prompt you can take away and share with others. You're welcome to share the slide deck. Um, I have a few more prompts to share, and then I'll open it up for discussion if there's any questions that you're interested in diving deeper into. I did want to give this example of a study prompt. To be honest, I wasn't coming up with the right words for the prompt. So one thing you can do is use the LLM as a prompt writer. So the idea, I just wanted a prompt that I could give to students where the LLM would give students problems for them to practice and solve. And if students got it right, it would give them harder problems. And if it got it wrong, it would give them easier problems. And I didn't know how to say that. So this was the prompt I gave on the left. This was the answer from ChatGPT, and it gave me a very friendly, nice prompt. Hi, I'm studying topic. Can you help me practice by giving me a problems to solve? Start with a problem at the beginner level. If I solve it right, give me a slightly harder problem next, and so on. So wanted to share that in case you hadn't tried asking an LLM for prompts. That's another strategy to use when you're not coming up with the language. And then certainly you could take this and tweak it. One thing I noticed when I was practicing with this prompt, I was solving math problems and we were going back and forth. The thing that I didn't like is that when I got a problem wrong, it was solving the problem for me. It would be like, no, that's wrong. Here's how you do it. And so it wasn't making me do work. It was just giving me answers and then giving me new problems. So as a teacher, I think I would edit this a little bit to say, and don't solve the problem for me. Like tutor me on how to solve it or something like that. And then the last bit I wanted to talk about is I have found a lot of value in this book. You can't read it, it might be backwards. Teaching with AI, I have it linked on the last page on the references and also right here. By Jose Antonio Bowen and Edward Watson. It really is helpful in thinking about all of AI in education. So it kind of goes into like a little bit of foundational, what is AI? Then it talks about different curriculum, like the different subjects, science, arts, ELA, English language arts, communications, history, etc. It talks about assessment. It talks about the issues of academic integrity and plagiarism. It talks about lesson planning. And the prompts that this book gives, it gives a ton. I've included some examples on this slide, but they're actually quite short and they're really meant to like get in depth at whatever you're trying to look for. And one of the things I really like about prompting is asking whether you're using Copilot or ChatGPT for like multiple choices. So you get to pick which ones you want to use, and this book models that really well. So design 5 different types of opening examples to connect this to new concepts of course themes, things like that. Provide discussion prompts. I really like this actually for a math and science class because we don't always think of creating discussions in these classes. And so to use a tool to do something that's a little bit less natural for us as STEM teachers is helpful. Thinking a lot of times in math, we say like, what's the real world example? But you can be even more specific, provide examples of companies that use this technique. Specify examples of nuances that high school students are likely to miss. This one I think is super valuable because as teachers, we don't know what we don't know, and what we don't know is what students are understanding or not understanding. There were so many times as a teacher when kids were nodding in my classroom, like, oh, they get it. And then they would go home and try a problem and not know how to do it. So having the chatbot as a thought partner, as a teacher, like what are students going to miss, that sort of thing. And then how might AI undercut the goals of this assignment, and how can we mitigate this, and how might AI enhance the assignment? So thinking about ways to make things deeper. Any reactions to any of these prompts? Are there ones that you would want to try, or have you tried things similar to these? Well, I know with a smaller crowd, we had less discussions, but yeah, prompting is definitely a skill now. And I have found that some students are very savvy at prompting. I was in a classroom when I heard 2 students whispering to each other, like, did you see that TikTok about ChatGPT? And they're learning prompting from social media. But then some students aren't using generative AI at all, so they don't know. When they talk to a chatbot, they're talking to it as if they're texting a friend with shorthand language and not accessing the full power of it. So being able as teachers to understand how to create really deep and effective prompts and how to iterate on our prompts to get deeper, and then helping students understand that, I think is really important too. I'm curious, I will announce our upcoming OECM sessions and hope that you can attend more of them. And I will stop the recording.